What's up guys, Andre here, and today I'd like to implement a drop-down component that has keyboard accessibility. If you saw my last video, we created a search component that was keyboard accessible, so I figured we'd do something similar with a drop-down. So here's what we'll be building: a simple drop-down, and you can click it, and you can do things like clicking off of it. But not only that, it is fully keyboard accessible, so if I tab through the items up here, we can highlight it, we can press enter on it, we can use the arrow keys, or we can use tab, and if we focus off of it, it will disappear. So that way. There's also the other way. So if I tab off of this, it should hide. Cool. So the behavior of the keyboard accessibility I just took from the bootstrap component. So here we are in bootstrap view. Here's a drop down. There's one up here as well, but this one functions the same way, where you can tab through it, and then you can press enter. You can use the arrow keys, but if you use the arrow keys, it focus traps it. I'm pressing up here and then it won't let me go. I'm pressing down here and it won't let me go, but it will let me use tab to tab off of it and go to the next item and focus that. So this all works in our component. Okay, so here's our starting point. The drop-down functionality is not implemented yet, but the CSS is. So I want to make this more about the functionality, so I just have a starting point for the CSS. So let me go over what I did. I made a new list item for the nav and added a drop-down menu component, which is right here. And here is the anchor tag with the image, and it's rounded, and the second flex item is this chevron down. So our next step is to just show the drop down. So I have a starting point. So we just absolutely position the drop down and pin it to the right. So right 0, and just make it look nice. So here's a starting point. And there it is, cool. And from here, you would just use your awesome CSS skills to make it look nice. So just reference any drop down out there. There's one on YouTube, for example. And here's a typical drop down. There's one on Twitter. And there's a typical drop down right there. And ours looks more like this. So again, I don't want to make this video about the CSS, so I have that part done already. So let's remove that. Again, it's the same structure, just absolutely position it. And here is what I came up with. There we go. And at this point, it's already somewhat keyboard accessible because of the way I placed the elements, and you should take this into account. Again, we have our anchor tag with our avatar image, and the unordered list is a sibling of that, so we can actually just tab right through it. So at this point, we should be able to tab through it, and this will work as long as it's visible. So once we add some view functionality to this, if we tab from here and it's not visible, then it will just go to the next item. So that's a start. So let's just focus on the basic functionality of it. So the first step is to make it visible. So let's add some state here. Okay, so add a script tag first. And let's add some state data. Return, say is visible, and say false to start. And let's make a method here. Let's say toggle visibility. And let's say this dot is visible, and just flip that. This dot is visible. Okay. And let's go ahead and put a click handler on this. So this is the avatar. So click equals toggle visibility, and that should work. Let me refresh. So this should work now if I click this. Oh, I forgot to add the vif. You can do vshow as well, but I'll stick with vif equals is visible. Okay. And there we go. So if you click on it, it's visible. But let's go ahead and make this feel better and keyboard accessible. So if we tab through this, enter actually works. We can press enter and toggle it. But if you look at the bootstrap component, space also works. Again, these two work the same, so I'll use this as an example. So enter opens it, escape closes it, which we'll work on in a second, and then also space opens it. So let's add a space event on this. So I'm going to put this on its own line. And just clean it up here. And let's put the href on top. Let's put all the handlers on the bottom. So let's go ahead and add a key down dot space, and it's say prevent default, and it's also called the toggle visibility. And I'm also going to put exact here, key down dot space dot exact, because later on I'm going to be listening for multiple keystrokes, namely shift tab, and it's good practice to add exact if you're using multiple keystrokes. So let's see if space works now. Go here, tab through, space works, enter works. I'm pressing space and enter, and it's toggling it. Cool. Okay, so the next thing I want to work on is clicking off of it. I want that to hide if you click off of something here. So let's go ahead and pull in a package that lets us do that easily. And it's called Vue click away. And you just have to use a directive, and you can easily add that functionality. So let's add this. Okay, and now we can import it. So let's go to code down here, just import it. And now to use it, we have to import the mixin. So let's add that down here. And now on our component, we can call this v on click away directive, and then just call a method that does what we want to do. So on our anchor tag up here, we can do v on click away here, and I'm gonna call a hide dropdown method, which we'll make right now. Let's duplicate this, and let's call it hide dropdown, and let's just set it to false. And now click away should work. So back to here, refresh, click, and click off, and it works. Cool. All right, let me quickly put a transition on this so it looks a bit more polished. I didn't show this in the last video, but I added a transition, so you can see a very subtle transition on this. So let's just add that. It's very straightforward. If you look at the Vue docs, this is the example I used, just basic enter leave transitions. So here's an example here. So all we have to do is wrap the transition, wrap our component in a transition tag, and give it a name and give it some CSS. So let's go ahead and do that. So if you want to see it, it's right here. Where's the transition tag? Right there. Okay, so let's do that for ours. So for the anchor tag, transition, name is fade, and let's add the closing transition. Actually, no, sorry, it shouldn't go there. It should go around the actual dropdown. So after the UL, right here, let's close it, and it's indented. Cool. And I already have this CSS. Do I have the CSS in place? Actually, no, it's scoped to the search component. And if I remove the scope here, then it should work. But I actually want to do something a bit different. So let me just grab this to show you the fade work. So this is a basic fade. Let's just do it with a higher time so you can see it. I'll put it back later. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Okay. So now we should have a fade. There we go. Let's set it back to a decent time, 0.2. Okay. But I also want to shift it down a bit just to give it some extra polish. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to change the name of the transition just so it doesn't conflict with this one. So I'm going to change it to fade dropdown or dropdown fade. Yeah, let's call it dropdown fade. Let's change these classes. We have to change this dropdown fade, dropdown fade, and dropdown fade. And let's change the name of the transition to dropdown fade. And this should still work normally. Fresh. Okay. But now let's change the CSS so it has more than one transition. And the only thing I want to add is a transform here. So transform, we're going to translate Y. So just move it down a bit. And let's move it down. -12 pixels is good. And then here we can just change the transition to all. 0.2 is good. And let's add an easing curve here. So ease in out. Okay, so now that should add that. There we go. Looks pretty good. That's a bit slow for me, so I'm going to make this quicker. Again, this is just personal preference. So that looks good to me. Cool. And click away still works. Awesome. Okay, let's focus on the keyboard accessibility now. I want to be able to press escape and hide it. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have to listen for it on not only this, but all of these as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's do key down dot escape dot exact equals hide dropdown. So this should work on this case. So we open it, press escape, but it's not going to work in these cases. Like I said, we have to add this to all of these in the list. So let me just clean these up. Actually, I'll just put it on 1.9. It's going to get kind of messy because later on I have to add more event listeners. But let's just go ahead and put it on 1.9. So all of these need an escape handler, and we should be good. Okay. Let me refresh. Now, open this and press escape on any of them. If I didn't miss any, then it should hide. Cool. Okay, so another thing I want to work on is, so if I focus off of this, it should hide. And that's the way the bootstrap component works. So let's use this one as an example. I showed you this in the beginning, but let me show you again. So I'm here, I tab here, I open it up, and if I tab, it will go into the menu, but if I shift tab, it will hide the menu. So there we go. But it also works in the other case where if I tab off of the last item, so I'm on the last item now, it should hide and go to the next focused item. So let's work on those two cases. So let's work on the case where we shift tab off of it. So if it's showing and we shift tab, then it should hide. So let's start with that one. So over here, we'll listen for a key down dot shift dot tab. So this listens for key modifiers, multiple key modifiers. So if you hold shift and press tab, and we just want to hide the dropdown. And now that should work. Let's refresh this, tab through. Okay, it's opened, tab in, and we shift tab, it hides. Cool. So let's work on the other case where we tab off of the last one and it should hide and go to the next one. So right now it stays open and goes to the next one, which isn't bad, but we want to mimic the bootstrap component. Again, pretty straightforward. We just have to do key down dot tab dot exact and only on the last component. So right here, the last item, I mean, key down dot tab. Let's set exact on this. Hide dropdown. Okay, that should work. Refresh. And we tab off of the last one, and it works. Cool. Okay, so the last thing I want to take a look at is using the arrow keys. So again, if you look at the bootstrap component, if we tab into it, we hit enter or space, tab works, which is what we've been doing. Shift tab goes back. So let me hide it again. But what also works is the arrow keys. So if I press down, then it will work. So let's hide that again. Also, if I press up, that will work. But it also focus traps. So I'm pressing up here, it doesn't let me leave. I'm pressing down here and it doesn't let me leave. But if I press tab or shift tab, that should work. Cool. So let's start with adding the focus. So having it visible, I mean, and then pressing up or down, and that focusing the first element in the dropdown. So back to our code. Let's add another event listener. So key down dot up dot exact, and I'm going to make a method called start arrow keys, and the same for down. So this is easy enough. We just have to focus the first element. So in this case, it will be the account. So what we can do is put a ref on the first element. Ref equals account and just focus it. And we could make this a bit dynamic later on, which I will show you. But for now, this is fine. So let's make a method called start arrow keys. And let's just focus. Oh, so it's only if it's visible. If the menu is visible, the drop-down is visible, then we just have to focus the account. And that should work. So I'm going to tap through this. I'm going to press enter, and then I'm going to press down. So that works. You can see it scrolled down a bit. I just have to call prevent on down. But let's see if the up arrow key works. I'm going to press up, and that works. So let's remove the scrolling. I just have to add prevent here. Let's add it here as well. Dot prevent. And let's give that another try. So now, okay, so it prevents the scrolling, at least for that first down arrow press. And let's try up. Okay, cool. Okay, now let's make the down and the up arrow keys actually focus the next element. So this is going to be very similar to what we did for the search dropdown here. But note the difference between this search dropdown and our dropdown here. So for this, we cannot tab through these items because they're actually not focused. The only thing that's focused is the input box here, but we can press the up and down arrow key, and that simulates it being focused. But for our drop down here, these items are actually focusable, so we actually do have to focus them. Again, I'm just mimicking the accessibility features of what Bootstrap does, because they definitely know what they're doing in terms of accessibility, and I don't really know much about accessibility. So yeah, all we want to do is make the arrow keys work in here. Like I said, again, you can use the arrow keys here, like this. Okay. So one naive way of implementing this is just to add references on all of these. Again, these are all hard-coded and it's not in a loop. So we can just do that if you like. If we know we're not going to change the menu often, then we can just have a reference to each of them. And then for the click handler on this, the up one goes to this one. Sorry, the down arrow key goes to this one. And there is no up for this one. But for this one, the up arrow keys goes to this one, and the down arrow key goes to this one. So yeah, that's one naive way of implementing it. Again, not the end of the world if you don't change any menu items, but if you do have to add one, then it gets a bit cumbersome to add one in between and then change the references to everything. Not everything, just the one you added, the one before, and the one after. So I hope that makes sense. We're not going to do it that way. We're going to make it a bit more dynamic. And the approach we're going to take is similar to what we did here. So we're going to, instead of adding a reference to each item, we're going to add a reference to the parent and then keep track of an index and reference it that way. So I'm going to add a ref on the parent here. Let's call it Dropdown, I believe is what I called it in my example project. And we also want to keep track of the highlighted index. So let's add some state here. And let's set it to 0. Oops. And again, I spelled this wrong. And now we can make methods for highlighting the next item or highlighting the previous item. Actually, I'm going to change this to focused index. That's a better name for it. Highlighting is a good name for the search component we made because that's what it's doing. It's not really focusing it, but now we are focusing it. So focused index. And let's make some methods for focus previous and focus next. So let's just add this in here. Okay. So we're going to update the index. This dot highlighted index, sorry, focused index, and just decrement it by 1. And the same for next, but we're going to increment it. Okay. So now we have to add listeners for each of our items up here. So for this first one, we're not going to listen for key up because we don't want it to go out of bounds. So we do key down, dot exact equals focused next. And we have to do this for each one. So for the next one, we want key down, but we also want a key up because we want to be able to go to the previous one. So focus down is the same. Focus down dot up is focus previous. And for the next ones, they're all the same, except the last one where we only have a key down. Only a key up. So let me just paste these in. Again, these should be on their own line, but I'll just leave this for now. Is this the last one? No, that's not the last one. This is the last one. So we don't need a key down on this one because it's the last item. So let's remove this. But we do need a key up. So now the arrow keys should update the index. So I'm going to open up DevTools. I'm going to open Vue DevTools. And let's open up our drop-down menu. And there's our focused index. And if I use the arrow keys, that should update. Again, it's not focusing yet, but the index should be updated. And it is, cool, because I pressed down that many times. And yeah, I should have called prevent on that, on all of these. So let me do that quickly on everything here. Prevent. Okay, so I added prevent on that. Now it should still work, but it won't scroll anymore. Let's double check. Okay, but the index should update. Should be at like 3 or 4, however many times I pressed down. Okay, 6. But if I refresh this, the index does not update on tab, and we want that to happen as well. So I'm pressing tab and I'm tabbing through this. You can see that the focus index is still 0. So let's add another listener for the tab event and also the shift tab event. So it's basically doing the same thing here, but instead of up and down, we're using tab and shift tab, just so the index is updated for tabs as well. So we're doing this because we want to be able to use tab or shift tab and still have the correct item focused. So let me show what I mean. So for this one, down, we're going to simulate tab for this one. So keydown.exact, keydown.tab.exact. So that's correct. And this should update it. So the index should be 1. If I just add it to this one, tabbing now should update the index. I press enter, tab. So the index should be 1. After I press tab once, refresh, there we go, cool. So I have to do this, also shift tab for all of them. So again, this is getting messy with several events, and there is a way to clean this up, which I'm not going to do, but I'll talk about it in a second. And we also want the shift tab version. So I'm going to paste that in. Keydown.shift.tab. And we want the focus previous. And I think for the shift tab, we don't want the exact. So these are the ones that focus next and focus previous. So for all of the items that are not in the first item or the last item. So let's add all these. This one, this one, this one, and this one is the last one, so we don't need the tab one on this one. So we don't need this one. Okay, so now tab and arrow keys should update the index. So I'm going to do a mix of tabs and arrow keys. So tab down, that should be 4, if I'm not mistaken, or 3. Okay, 3. And yeah, so that is working. But now we have to actually focus the item. So focusing still works, obviously, for tab, because that's the default behavior. Actually, you know what? It's not working anymore, because I believe I put prevent on that, and I shouldn't have. Yeah, so all of these shift tabs that prevent, and also the tabs that prevent, I don't want to prevent the default behavior. So I'm going to remove the prevents on the tabs. So we only want to prevent the default behavior for the up key, because that scrolls. So key down.tab. So yeah, I'll move all the prevents behind the scenes for the tabs. Okay, so I removed all the prevents, and now tabbing should still work the way it used to. Okay, so tabbing, I'm pressing tab here, but the up and down arrow keys do not work. So to get them to work, we just have to reference the parent and grab the index we're currently at. So that's why we have a highlighted index or a focused index. So let me show you what I mean. So for each one of these, we want to grab the currently selected item from the dropdown ref. So refs.dropdown .children, and this is where we need the index. So this dot focused index. So this would be, let me show you what I mean. So this would be the list item, but we don't want the list item. We want the actual anchor tag. So we have to go one level deeper. So where am I? Right here. So again, .children 0 is the anchor tag. That's what we want. And that's what we want to focus. And same for focus next. And let's see if the arrow keys work. Okay, I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to press down. And I'm pressing down, and close Vue DevTools. And I'm pressing down here, and that doesn't work. Actually, I should prevent that scrolling, but I'm pressing up here, and up doesn't work. So by doesn't work, I mean the focus trap is working. So yeah, let me add those cases. So for the last item, yeah, let's add a key down, down, exact, prevent. And we don't have to call anything. Key down, down, exact, prevent, and it's called nothing. Let's copy this and do the same for the first case up here. Let's put it after. Let's put it right here before the down. Key down, up, exact, prevent. So now the scrolling should be prevented when we're focus trapped on the last item. Cool, and it works for up as well. But we have a problem here. If we mix the down key and the tab key, then it's going to skip over one. So you saw it skip over one, and now the indexes are not working correctly. So the problem here is we only want to focus it if it was a down arrow press, because the default behavior of tab and shift tab already focuses the item. So all we have to do is add a parameter down here for these focus previous and focus next. So first of all, I want to extract this to its own method because those two lines are the same. Just bump this down here. Let's just say this dot focus item and grab this, put this here. Okay. But yeah, that should still work. I have confidence that that should still work. But like I said, we have to check if what we're pressing is an arrow key. And we only want to focus if it is an arrow key. So is arrow key, sorry, here. And like I said, we only want to focus if this dot is arrow key, then focus the item. And if it isn't, it's a tab key press, and that should still focus it because that's the default behavior. Sorry, not this is arrow key, just the parameter arrow key. Put that in there. And let's fix this. Okay. And now we just have to update all our references and add that boolean. And again, this is a bit cumbersome, but we only have to do it once. So tab is fine. Actually, no, we have to add false or true to every instance of focus next. So let's do a few and then I'll do the rest behind the scenes. So this is a tab press, so we don't need it. There's nothing going on here. This is a key down, so we do need it. And that's it for this one. Again, this is a tab, so it's false. This is a shift tab, so it's false. This is an up arrow key, so it's true. And this is a down arrow key, so it's true. And I'm going to do the rest behind the scenes. Okay, so I added the false and true to all of these items. And now, if I did this correctly, we should be able to use a mix of shift and tab, and they should focus accordingly. So I'm using tab, tab, down, up, up, tab, 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 up, 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 down, down, down. Okay, so it looks like it works. And we can still shift tab out of it and go to the next one. We can also tab out of this last one. And there's a focus trap. Let's tab out of this one. So it's working correctly. Cool. So there you have it, guys. We managed to build a keyboard accessible dropdown that works the same way that the keyboard accessibility in Bootstrap does. And our components are looking and feeling pretty good to use. So we have this search component that we built. Actually, start from scratch. I'm going to press slash to focus. We're going to search. We're going to press escape. We're going to tab to the next item. We're going to press space. We're going to go through these. And I have a bug here. The down arrow key is not working. Okay, seems like it's working now. Not sure why that wasn't working. One more thing we can optimize. For these start arrow keys, we can just use sort of similar to what we did here, but just get the first item here. So we don't need a ref to the first item. We can leave it like this if you want, but if we add something to the beginning, I'm going to comment this out, then you might forget to update the ref here, and let's change this to 0. And this should still work, but we no longer need the ref to the account or the first item. I'll leave it in there, but you can see that this still works too. So I'm going to open it, I'm going to press up, and that highlights the first one, and everything else works accordingly. Cool. All right, I forgot to talk about how we can clean up some of this code. So I'm not going to do it here, but what we can do to clean this up is put all of these menu items or drop-down items in a loop. Sorry, in an array, and then loop over them so that we don't have to repeat ourselves for all of these event listeners here. But we're going to have to take into account a few things like the line down here and also the SVG icons. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you can see how if we put these items in an array, we don't have to repeat ourselves for this, but we also have to add some functionality for like checking the bounds and taking into account a few things like the SVGs and the line. But I think this is still maintainable this way, the way we have it here, because if we have to add another list item, all we have to do is add another one and then just make sure to check if it's one of the ones at the end or the beginning, and if it's not, then it should still work. So I'm going to add this one here, and there's the right there, and it still works. So let's see. The keyboard accessibility still works. Yeah, it still works perfectly. Awesome. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one. Okay, thanks. Bye.